Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Tech Showdown. My name is Kevin, this is my co-host Teddy, and today I start a new video series. This is going to be a 6-part series that I did in conjunction with Nvidia and Gigabyte. So I want to thank both of those guys for helping make this series possible. And what we're going to be doing in this series is take 3 Nvidia graphics cards. We've got the GTX1080, which is in my rig right now, the GTX1070, and the GTX1060. You'll notice these are all the same model, the Gigabyte G1 gaming model. That's to keep it nice and consistent also. We're going to be taking these 3 graphics cards and picking one game for each video, and basically then what I'll be doing is showing you guys the test results for testing out these graphics cards at all 3 main resolutions within that game, 1080p, 1440p, and 2160p or 4K. And then basically go over what settings I think and what resolution is best for each of these graphics cards. So it's basically a consumer advice type thing. Now first, I have to tell you guys that I'm not getting paid to do this at all by Nvidia or Gigabyte. They just helped provide the graphics cards for me so that I was able to make this video for you guys. So don't worry, there's no bias or anything like that, and we're just going to be showing you straight results for the testing, so you guys can make your own minds up about it in terms of, you know, how good the cards are based on how many frames they put up at the different resolution. Now the first game we're going to be doing is Gears of War 4. So this game's pretty good. It's a third-person shooter. I quite like it. It's quite a good-looking game. I would say the only detractor from me personally, having played through the whole thing, would be it's a little bit on the repetitive side, and I would have liked it if there were more weapons you could use. But aside from that, a lot of the point defense stuff is pretty cool, and overall, it is a pretty solid game. So first, we're going to bump the settings all the way up to Ultra and test out these graphics cards at all 3 main resolutions, just so we have a good baseline, because that's the first thing you want to do is, you know, max out the game, turn everything up to its highest setting, and then benchmark it so we have an idea of how these graphics cards perform. So let's jump right into it then. So at 1080p, we can see that all 3 graphics cards handle it no worries. So if you're on a 1080p 60Hz monitor, everything's going to do just fine. The 1060 does solid there also. Now let's move up to 1440p. Again, we see the 1080 and 1070 solid. The 1060 there falling down a little bit, you know, slightly under. That would still be very playable at 1440p 60 Hz, but it's a little bit falling down. And then let's go up to 4K. So we see even the the 1080 is struggling a little bit at 4K, and you see the 1070 and the 1060 really struggling. So I mean, if you don't mind gaming at 30, you know, above 30 FPS at 4K, then hey, the 1080 and 1070 will still do you really solid, but really, that's not very ideal. So let's first go over to the 1080 then and look at how that does when we start to optimize it. So if we set it at 4K, because that's really what you're wanting to be playing on with a GTX 1080, is 4K. In the GeForce Experience optimized 4K settings, it bumps it up a little bit by about 1 frame on the average and 2 frames on the minimums, which is okay. But when I put my own settings on, which I'll put up on the screen for you now, at these settings I was getting 65.6 FPS average and 54.3 FPS minimum. And that's, I think, very solid. Now those settings I quite like. It's very good. It doesn't, you know, detract too much from the game. It doesn't lower it too much. I like having the anti-aliasing up quite high so you don't get the jaggies and other things. So that's really good, and that's what I would recommend. Also for these settings to run at 1440p if you're someone who wants to run or is running a 1440p high refresh rate monitor. Now let's move over to its little brother, the GTX 1070. So if we're playing at 4K and we use the GeForce Experience optimized settings, it doesn't really help a hell of a lot. I mean, we gain about 5 FPS, which is pretty good on the average, and a bit more, about a 5 again on the minimums, but it's not really ideal. So when I actually started to do my own settings for it to try get it at above 60 FPS consistently, which is really where you'd want it to be sitting, as most people gaming on a 4K display are gaming at 60 Hz or want it just above 60 FPS, you had to lower the settings too much, and it just didn't look very good. So yeah, I dropped it down to 1440p because I think that's where it's better at. So if you've just got a 1440p 60 Hz monitor, then you can run this on the ultra settings and the 1070 will be just fine, get over 60 FPS consistently as I showed earlier. However, if you're a person running a 1440p high refresh rate monitor, then you're probably going to want to run these settings. So the ones I put up on the screen right now, those will be very, very solid. You're getting about 100 FPS average and goes down to about 80 minimum. And that's going to be very, very good. It's a nice balance for those people that are running, say, a 120 Hz monitor with graphics settings. So it looks pretty, but also getting that high refresh rate. And now let's move over to the youngest brother of the three graphics cards, the GTX 1060. So this does solid at 1080p on Ultra, however it starts to fall down at 1440p and 4K. So optimizing this for 4K will get you just barely over 30 FPS in the GeForce Experience settings, but it's not really ideal. And there's no, it just 4K is a little bit beyond this card. You're gonna have to turn down the graphics settings a bit too much for it. However, at 1440p 60 Hz, you can get very solid frame rates. Putting up these ones right now, as you can see, it will go up to 67.9 FPS average with a 56 FPS minimum. That's very solid for 1440p 60 Hz. That's mainly what you're probably going to be wanting to aim for with this guy. However, if you're running a 1080p high refresh rate monitor, then I would run these same settings, and the 1060 will do very, very well in that, getting over 100 FPS. So that will be very good for those of you running a 1080p high refresh rate monitor like a 120 Hz or 144 Hz monitor, and that's what this guy will do very well in. So as you can see from all that, Gears of War, a bit of a beast to run. Really, you only want to attempt 4K with like the 1080 as I showed. The 1070, very, very good there for 1440p gaming. Going to be very solid for both 60 Hz and high refresh rate 1440 gaming. And the 1060 will do all your 1080p needs, high refresh rate or just standard refresh rate 60 Hz, very, very nicely. It's going to, have a little bit of problems with 1440p, although you should be able to game at 60 Hz without too many worries at 1440p. But 4K is just a bit beyond it. Now, I'll also tell you guys the boost speeds, just so you know. The 1060 and the 1070 had exactly the same ones of just under 2000 MHz, 1999 MHz. They were both exactly the same. The 1080 was a little bit slower, which is quite interesting. It was coming in at 1974 MHz. So a little bit different, but those are pretty much all the same speed. So that's really going to show you guys the difference in the actual GPU chips themselves rather than, boost speeds or anything like that. And of course, these results will change if you're someone who's overclocking their graphics card. Obviously, the FPS will be a bit higher if you're a person doing that, because these are all being run at their stock default speeds. So I thank you all for watching this video. I hope it was informative. Let me know what you'd like to see maybe in the next episode I do for it, what information you would also like. And yeah, I really thank you guys for watching this video. Please subscribe to Tech Showdown if you haven't already, and like the video. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.